Good afternoon. I call this meeting to order. A quorum is present, and without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. Pursuant to Committee Rule 4, House Rule 11, Clause 2H4, the chair announces that he may postpone further proceedings today on the question of approving any measure or matter or adopting an amendment on which a recorded vote or the yeas or nays are ordered. Before I proceed, I'd like to go over some items for our remote hearing. First, if you are experiencing connectivity issues, please make sure you or your staff contact our designated technical support so those issues can be resolved immediately. Members participating remotely must continue to remain visible on camera for the duration of their participation in the hearing unless they experience connectivity issues or other technical issues that render the member unable to fully participate on camera. It is committee policy that members participating remotely will remain muted when not recognized, just like turning your microphone on and off during an in-person hearing. Now, this is out of courtesy to all members on the committee, and so that background noise does not interfere with another member who is recognized to speak. When you are recognized, you will need to unmute your microphone and pause for 2 to 3 seconds before speaking so that your words are captured on the live stream. Now, in the event of a recorded vote, members are encouraged to state their name first, then proceed to render his or her vote. By doing so, this will give the cameras a chance to locate who's speaking. Without objection, members will be recognized in order of seniority during any follow-up debate on amendments. This will make it easier for me to ensure that all members participating have an opportunity to be recognized. Now, if you wish to have a document inserted into the record, please ask for unanimous consent and ask your staff and have your staff email the document to veteransaffairs.hearings@mail.house.gov. It will be uploaded into the committee document repository, and please also use this email to submit any amendments that have not been previously submitted. Now, does any member have a question about the procedures for today's meeting? Hearing or seeing none, we will proceed. Now, I now recognize myself for an opening statement, and I want to express my gratitude for everyone being here. Today, the agenda includes 9 bills for our consideration as we head into August. And I want to commend the work of this committee and its members and staff. We have continued to do the work on behalf of our nation's veterans, their families, and caregivers through very challenging times. While our country has made significant progress in its battle against COVID-19, we still have a road ahead of us that is uncertain. The rise of the Delta variant and increasing cases and deaths throughout the country is deeply worrisome. We cannot let up on our guard yet. And I will take this opportunity to continue to urge my fellow Americans to get vaccinated if they have not already done so. It is safe, free, effective, and widely available. If we are going to get to a place where we can get closer to normal, quote unquote, widespread vaccination is the only option. Now, despite these difficulties, our committee has continued its bipartisan efforts to bring transparency and accountability to the programs and institutions that serve veterans and to legislate change where we have identified the need for it. We have met the moment in passing much needed economic and other relief for veterans, as well as ensuring that all veterans and their spouses and caregivers can get vaccinated. Now today, we push forward with legislation to benefit veterans, and today's agenda introduces bills to further expand access to mental health services for Native veterans, increase veterans' buying power when purchasing energy-efficient homes, provide a health safety net for service members during the transition process by automatically enrolling those eligible in VA healthcare, require better information be provided to transitioning service members about apprenticeship opportunities, expand access to the caregiver program, and examine the impact of racial disparities in the provision of VA benefits, among other bills. Now, I will note a change to today's agenda, which is the committee will not proceed to consider HR 3944 the Burial for Guards and Reserves Act of 2021, introduced by Mr. Pappas. I want to thank Mr. Pappas for introducing this important bill, but upon further discussion, I've determined that additional work is needed on the bill. Once we complete that work, we can proceed to consideration of the bill. Now, I want to thank my colleagues for introducing the bills that we're marking up today, and I also want to express my appreciation to staff on both sides for working to perfect them. Now, with that, I want to recognize Ranking Member Mr. Boss for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we're here this afternoon to consider 8 bills that would impact the delivery of care and education, home loans, and compensation to our veterans. 3 of these bills are sponsored by Republican members of this committee, General Berkman and Dr. Murphy. I thank them for their leadership and look forward to supporting their bills this afternoon. That said, Mr. Chairman, I will regretfully be unable to support some of the other bills on today's agenda. 2 weeks ago, the subcommittee on health held a legislative hearing that included 3 Republican bills proposed, and we then voted on today that we were going to vote on today, and 9 bills sponsored by the Democrats. I was surprised and disappointed that none of those Democrat bills, many of which are bipartisan, are on today's markup agenda. Many of the bills that are on today's markup agenda have not had any regular order in the 117th Congress. That means that we do not have views or cost estimates on them. We do not know how the administration, VSOs, or stakeholders view these bills. We do not know how many additional taxpayer dollars would be required to implement them. We do not know how those bills would impact the access to care for veterans under existing law. It is, if this sounds eerily similar to last month's markup on the chairman's toxic exposure bill, that is because it is. I know that we both care deeply about fulfilling our commitment to veterans. Mr. Chairman, and I am more than willing to work with you to advance good bipartisan proposals to benefit veterans and their families. But the first time the members are given an opportunity to consider a piece of legislation should not be when they're being asked to vote for it. My staff and I learned just 2 days ago for the first time which bills would be on today's agenda. Since then, we have tried behind the scenes where possible to work through our concerns and get the information we need to feel more comfortable with supporting some of the bills before us. But I sincerely hope this will be the last markup containing bills with so little on the record substance backing them up. And I sincerely hope that this will be the last markup where members are asked to trust good intentions without the information members need to have confidence in their vote. That is no way of doing the people's business. We can do better than that. At the bare minimum, we can do better than that. We must do better than that for the veterans and the people that we serve. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Bost. I now call up HR 4657.
HR 4657 to amend Title 38 United States Code to improve the act.
No objection. The first reading is dispensed with. The committee will now proceed to consideration of HR 4657. And I now recognize Mr. Levin to offer an amendment.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for including my legislation, the Veteran Home Energy Savings Act, in today's markup. This bill seeks to strengthen veterans' ability to purchase energy-efficient homes that will lower their monthly energy costs and help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. In order to underwrite a VA home loan, VA requires lenders to consider whether the veteran has sufficient income after paying housing costs to cover other living expenses. My bill would allow lenders to factor energy savings into this calculation when a veteran provides an energy efficiency report for the home they are purchasing. This would provide veterans with more freedom to purchase higher value, energy efficient homes that are still within their means. Mortgage lenders, appraisers, energy raters, and residential energy consumption experts, energy efficiency organizations, real estate agents, home builders and remodelers, consumer advocates, and veteran service organizations would all have a seat at the table as part of an advisory group to ensure this program's success. This bill will also align minimum efficiency criteria for new homes that receive VA loans with those for Federal Housing Agency and U.S. Department of Agriculture loans. This bill is a win-win for our veterans and for the planet. I urge my colleagues to support the amendment in the nature of a substitute to the Veteran Home Energy Savings Act, and I yield back.
Mr. Levin, thank you very much for your words in favor of your amendment in nature of substitute, but I need to first also recognize you to offer the amendment. So do you have an amendment at the desk?
Yes, I have an amendment in the nature of a substitute for our Veteran Home Energy Savings Act.
And it's HR 4657. The clerk will designate the amendment in nature of a substitute.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 4657, offered by Mr. Levin of California. Strike all after the enacting clause.
The text was circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules, and without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with, and the substitute will be considered as original text for the purposes of amendment. Mr. Levin, I already recognized you for your comments. We'll consider your comments to have been made in support of your amendment nature of substitute. Is there, let me make a comment on the amendment in nature of substitute before I recognize other members who may wish to speak to it. The legislation would increase the veterans' buying power when purchasing a home with a decreased environmental footprint. VA has long recognized the value in energy efficient home building, including their already existing energy efficient mortgage program, which provides loans to cover the cost of making new energy efficiency improvements to a home. This legislation builds upon that to better inform energy conscious veteran home buyers. The Veteran Home Loan Program is one of the most effective and generous programs that exist for service members and veterans. This program provides more than 1 million loans and refinances of a loan every year with no down payments. The legislation before us would allow veterans to voluntarily obtain an energy efficiency report on the property they wish to use their VA home loan benefit on, providing the benefit of the veteran with an estimate of the expected energy cost savings of the new home they are considering, along with learning the improvements that have been made on the home to make it more energy efficient. Now, should a veteran opt in to receiving an energy efficient report, they will know more about the homes they are considering, making more energy efficient homes more attractive to veteran buyers. Now, this is an excellent idea to voluntarily promote energy efficiency practices, and I urge my colleagues on the committee to support the legislation. Now, does any other member wish to be recognized to discuss Mr. Levin's amendment in nature of substitute to HR 4657? Ranking Member Bost, I recognize you for 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I support Mr. Levin's amendment to the nature of a substitute for HR 4657. The VA Home Loan Program is one of the best administered and successful benefit programs that the VA provides to veterans. Last year, VA guaranteed a record 1.2 million home loans for veterans, and they are on pace to crush that record this year. Mr. Levin's amendment would expand on the success of that program. Moreover, the amendment would help veteran homeowners receive potential credits for savings that the veterans would receive for existing energy efficient products or services inside the home. This is a noble goal, as it is recognized the positive impact of the products have put not only on our environment, but on our veterans' monthly budget as well. As a veteran homeowner who has benefited from the use of solar panels at my own home, I'm very supportive of these programs. However, I agree that the VA testimony on the original text on this bill that was which was consideration of these energy efficiencies would slow down the underwriting process. Like most members, I have heard from the veterans in my district that the VA underwriting process is already too cumbersome. it would be unwise to add yet another layer to the lengthy and necessary process. But I was pleased to work with Mr. Levin and his staff to ensure that the new process would only go forward if the veteran wanted the evaluation. Lastly, it is my understanding CBO has come back with an informal mandatory score of about $2 million over a 10-year budget window for this particular bill. Now, with that being said, I look forward to working with Chairman Takano to find the appropriate offsets for this provision prior to its consideration on the floor. Unfortunately, this is the type of thing that we should have been able to address in this markup and not on the floor. But in the future, I hope that the mandatory offsets are identified before the markup, before we mark up any other legislation. And I thank Mr. Levin for working with us on this ANS, and with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Bost. Are there any other members who wish to discuss Mr. Levin's amendment in nature of substitute? I'm looking. All right. If there are no further members who wish to discuss the amendment in nature of substitute, I will now say that the question before the committee is now on Mr. Levin's amendment in nature of substitute to HR 4657. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the Levin amendment in nature of a substitute is agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. I now recognize Ranking Member Bost for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that a favorable report, that we favorably report HR 4657 to the House floor of Representatives.
Thank you, Ranking Member Bost. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to, and without objection, the staff is authorized to make necessary technical and conforming changes in the committee amendments.
Mr. Chairman.
Ranking Member Bost.
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to House Rule 11, Clause 2, I give notice of intent to file minority and supplemental, additional, and dissenting views on HR 4657 as amended.
Without objection. I now call up HR 912.
HR 912, to direct the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to make certain.
First reading is dispensed with. The committee will now proceed to the consideration of HR 912, and I recognize Ms. Brownlee to offer an amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 912 at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 912.
Circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules, and without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with, and the substitute will be considered as original text for the purposes of amendment. Ms. Brownlee, you are recognized for 5 minutes in support of your amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am so pleased to offer this amendment in the nature of a substitute for consideration by the full committee to my bill, HR 912, the American Indian and Native Alaska Veterans Mental Health Act. As many of you know, Native veterans proudly and consistently serve in the United States military at a higher rate than any other racial or ethnic group. Tragically, they also die by suicide at a higher rate than most. It is absolutely vital that Native veterans get the best, most culturally appropriate mental health care and suicide prevention services from the VA. This bill ensures that every VA medical center has a minority veteran coordinator who is accountable for, among other responsibilities, developing and documenting outreach, mental health care delivery, and suicide prevention to all tribal veterans in that facility's catchment area. Under the bill, VA is required to train coordinators in culturally appropriate care, and importantly, also collect data on the minority status, tribal enrollment, and second language capacity of its own VA mental health care providers. In this amendment in the nature of a substitute, I'm pleased to add a new provision to also give VA the authority it needs to include tribes in its successful evidence-based Governor's Challenge Program to prevent veteran suicide. The Governor's Challenge Program has shown great promise in helping states put together their own teams to develop local solutions around the issue of veteran suicide prevention. I know that the VA would like to include tribes in the existing program. Working directly with the tribal leaders and veterans across state boundaries to develop their own unique approaches that work for them. This authority immediately gives VA that power to act with speed and urgency. When I originally introduced the original bill, it garnered wide support from many, many veteran service organizations, as well as mental health and tribal communities. As chairwoman of the House Veteran Affairs Subcommittee on Health, my top priority is ensuring that VA is providing equity and access to comprehensive, high-quality care, especially to our most vulnerable veterans. For hundreds of years, Native Americans have fought to defend our nation, and it's time that we provide them with culturally appropriate mental health care as a part of the holistic care that Native veterans receive from VA. I'm proud to introduce this legislation to better address the needs of our Native veteran population, and I urge my colleagues to support it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Brownlee. As you know, veteran suicide prevention is a top priority for this committee. We passed substantial legislation in Congress in this area, but we have an ongoing commitment to address any gaps that remain in our work to promote mental health and preventing suicide, especially among subgroups of veterans for whom suicide rates remain tragically high. And as you note, that includes Native veterans. And I want to take a moment to just commend you for the leadership you have displayed in making sure that we do right by our Native veterans, and I commend you for that. This bill would direct VA to ensure that every VA medical center has a minority veteran coordinator who would be accountable for ensuring direct outreach to local tribes and documenting delivery of culturally appropriate VA suicide prevention and intervention services for tribal veterans. I'm particularly pleased that in this amendment in nature of substitute, you also have added authority for VA to include tribes in its incredibly successful evidence-based Governor's Challenge Suicide Prevention Program. We have heard from VA that it is eager to work with tribes through this program and with this authority, and that work can begin immediately. And I know that under your leadership, you will be doing the necessary oversight to make sure that there's progress being made in this area. So I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. Does any other member wish to be recognized to discuss Ms. Brownlee's ANS to HR 912?
Mr. Chairman.
Ranking Member Bost.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR.
In advance and pursuant to committee rules. Mr. Bost, you are recognized for 5 minutes to speak in support of your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment would stipulate that each VA medical center have a minority veteran coordinator only to the extent practicable. It would remove the requirement that it be a full-time position. It would require VA to identify minority veteran populations in need of outreach before outreach is required. It would also make a written outreach plan less prescriptive. And my amendment would also ensure that minority veteran coordinators address the needs of all minority veterans populations, including, but not limited to, the American Indian and Alaskan Native veterans. Let me be clear, Mr. Chairman, that I support your and Congresswoman Brownlee's efforts to support veterans who are undeserved and underserved and at high risk. That is a priority that we all have in common. But because I have not heard from the VA or stakeholders about the bill, I do not know that such coordinators are necessary in every VA medical center as a full-time position. I also do not know how difficult or costly it would be for the VA to implement this mandate. I absolutely agree that the American Indian and the Alaskan Native veterans are deserving of more outreach and support. But again, because I have not heard from the VA or stakeholders about the bill, I do not know that they will solely deserving of such a outreach and support, and not other minority populations would not receive that, would not also require to have that. My strong preference on this bill and on all others would be that we go through regular order and we would have a clear CBO cost estimate before moving to markup. This bill has not met either of those criteria. That said, I believe my amendment addresses my concerns about this proposal, and I hope my colleagues will join me in supporting the amendment and then the underlying bill, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Bost. Well, as you know, Congresswoman Brownlee introduced this bill last year and then reintroduced it again in April of this year. And I have spoken publicly about our commitment to advancing this legislation. I must urge my colleagues to oppose Ranking Member Bost's amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 912, since it would make it optional for VA to have minority veteran coordinators at all facilities. It is already optional now, and this important outreach to Native veterans is not happening with enough cultural competence, consistency, and urgency. This bill has tremendous support from VSOs and mental health organizations, and there really is no need to take a step back when we must be forward-leaning on this issue as possible. And with that, is there any further debate on the amendment, to the amendment in the nature of a substitute?
Mr. Chairman, I would just say thank you for your comments, and I think they're absolutely spot on. I appreciate the ranking member's general support of the bill, and I sincerely believe him when he says that. And but this is about currently these coordinators are optional, and there are very few of them, if any. And this bill is about making sure that we have the coordinators there that are culturally competent. This is a thoroughly needed program for our veterans. So I appreciate your comments, and I hope that the rest of the committee would concur by voting no on this amendment.
Thank you, Chairwoman Brownlee. Any other members wish to speak to the Bost amendment, to the amendment in the nature of substitute? If not, I will ask all those in favor of the Bost amendment to say aye.
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 All those opposed? Aye. All those opposed say no.
No. No.
In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it, and the amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute is not agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Now the question is now on the Brownlee amendment to the nature and a amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 912. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
All those opposed say no.
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 No. No.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the Brownlee amendment in the nature of a substitute is agreed to. And without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. I now recognize Vice Chairman Levin for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that HR 912 as amended be reported favorably to the House.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
All those opposed say no.
No.
No. No.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. And without objection, the staff is authorized to make necessary technical and conforming changes in the committee amendments.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bost.
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to House Rule 11, Clause 2, I give notice of intent to file minority or supplemental, additional, or dissenting views on HR 912 as amended.
Without objection. I now call up HR 3856.
HR 3856, to require the Comptroller General of the United States to conduct.
This reading is dispensed with. Committee will now proceed to the consideration of HR 3856. And I recognize myself to offer an amendment. The clerk will designate the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 3856, offered by Mr.
Pursuant to committee rules and without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, is considered read, and will be considered as original text for the purposes of amendment. I recognize myself for 5 minutes in support of my amendment in the nature of a substitute. Now, to build a stronger, more welcoming, and more effective VA, we must work to build back veterans' trust in the institution. We need to ensure that VA care and benefits are distributed fairly to all eligible veterans, regardless of social or physical disparities. No veterans should face barriers to care or benefits they've earned. That's why we must look back to document how veterans were denied benefits, remediate that disparity, and ensure we equitably disperse future benefits to all who have served. How we address disparities must be based on facts, evidence, and data. And that's why the nonpartisan Government Accountability Office should perform this examination. Under the legislation, the GAO would study racial and ethnic disparities regarding VA compensation benefits, including VA disability ratings and rejection of fully developed claims for benefits under laws administered by VA. The VA Secretary would brief Congress within a year after passage of the bill and then prepare a report, including recommendations to address identified disparities. Senator Raphael Warnock has introduced the same legislation, which is already under consideration for floor action in the Senate. I urge my colleagues to support this important legislation. Does any member wish to be recognized to discuss an amendment in nature of substitute to HR 3856? Ranking Member Boss, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And when the men and women of our military sign up to serve, we make a promise to take to care for them upon their separation, regardless of age, ethnicity, race, or gender. However, I've heard concerns from veterans who allege to have experienced unequal treatment in the VA benefits system based on their minority group status. Let me be clear, I have a zero tolerance for any form of discrimination at the VA. Unfortunately, we do not have objective data to determine whether there is this racial or ethnic bias in the VA claims process. The chairman's amendment in the nature of substitute to HR 3856 would help address this question by requiring GAO study to determine whether any differences exist in the way VA administers compensation benefits based on the veteran's background. This report would provide Congress and VA the information we need to determine what inequities exist, and if so, how to address them. Additionally, during testimony last Congress on HR 4165, VA testified that it does not collect private citizens' information such as gender and minority group status unless it is necessary to determine benefits eligibility. Therefore, I appreciate that Chairman Takano's ANS would also request for GAO to provide recommendations on how VA can improve data collection, which may better inform the VA and can ensure fairness in the benefit process. This bill would provide important insight into how we can make VA a more inclusive place for veterans. I will be supporting the amendment to HR 3856. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Ranking Member Boss. Does any other member wish to be recognized to discuss HR 3856? If not, the question is now on the Takano amendment in nature of substitute to HR 3856. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the Takano amendment in nature of a substitute is agreed to without objection. The motion to reconsider is laid on the table. I recognize Ranking Member Boss for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we report HR 3856 as amended favorably to the floor.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to.
Mr. Chairman.
Ranking Member Bost?
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to House Rule 11, Clause 2, I give notice of intent to file minority and supplemental additional and dissenting views on HR 3856 as amended.
And without objection, and also without objection, the staff is authorized to make necessary technical and conforming changes to in the committee amendments. I now call up HR 147.
HR 147.
Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with. The committee will now proceed to consideration of HR 147. I recognize myself to offer an amendment. The clerk will designate the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute.
That's circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules, and without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with, and the substitute will be considered as original text for the purposes of amendment. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes in support of my amendment in the nature of a substitute. Now, the amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 147, the Bringing Registered Apprenticeships to Veteran Education, or BRAVE Act, would increase access to information regarding registered apprenticeships for veterans. Registered apprenticeships are an important component of our workforce system. They provide on-the-job training with an employer that teaches workers the practical and theoretical skills they need to succeed in a field, all the while earning a paycheck. The Department of Labor validates registered apprenticeships to ensure that participants are receiving high-quality instruction and training. At the end of the program, apprentices receive a national industry-recognized credential in their field. This bill would require the Department of Labor to improve access to registered apprenticeships for transitioning service members and veterans by maintaining a searchable website that reconnects them, or that connects them with employer programs that are endorsed by veteran service organizations and other veteran-specific groups. Registered apprenticeships provide a unique pathway into in-demand, high-quality jobs, and the BRAVE Act will make it easier for veterans to learn and earn when training for their career. I urge my colleagues to support this important legislation. I ask, does any other member wish to be recognized to discuss the amendment in nature of substitute to HR 147? I see Ranking Member Bost. I recognize you for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I am supportive of your amendment in the nature of substitute HR 147, the BRAVE Act. Every year, nearly 200,000 servicemen and women transition out of active duty into the civilian sector. This amendment in the nature of a substitute would require the Department of Defense to provide information on apprenticeships programs to separate service members who are participating in the Transition Assistance Program, or the TAP program. This amendment is in the nature of a substitute, would require the Assistant Secretary of Labor for Veterans Employment and Training Services to establish a website that would include information on national apprenticeships and those approved for GI Bill benefits, so it is readily available to transition to those that are transitioning service members. I want to point out that certain provisions of this amendment fall under the jurisdiction of the House Armed Services Committee. I look forward to working with the chairman to acquire a waiver so that this piece of legislation can move forward. And I want to thank the chairman, thank Chairman Takano for working with me on this amendment. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Bost. Are there any other members who wish to discuss the Takano amendment in nature of substitute HR 147? If there's no further debate, the question now is on Takano ANS to HR 147. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the Takano amendment in nature of a substitute is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. I now recognize Ranking Member Bost for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move we favorably report HR 147 as amended to the full House floor of Representatives.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Without objection, the staff is authorized to make necessary technical and conforming changes in the committee amendments. Mr. Boss?
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to House Rule 11, Clause 2, I give notice of intent to file minority and supplemental, additional and/or dissenting views on H.R. 147 as amended.
Without objection. H.R. 4673. I now call up H.R. 4673.
H.R. 4673 to amend Title 38 United States Code to provide.
Pursuant to committee rules, without objection, the first reading is dispensed with. I now recognize myself to discuss H.R. 4673, the eVest Act. Now, many of you all know that I have made veteran suicide prevention a top priority in this committee. Last Congress, we passed bipartisan, bicameral mental health legislative packages, including the Commander John Scott Hannon Veterans Mental Health Improvement Act and the Veterans Compact Act. And earlier this year, we passed the Sergeant Ketchum Rural Veterans Mental Health Act. But there's always more work to be done. My bill, H.R. 4673, the Ensuring Veterans Smooth Transition Act, or eVest Act, builds on our work and finally closes one of the most glaring gaps for veterans to successfully access high-quality VA health services, the enrollment process. We know that the months following transition out of the military can be very stressful and particularly risky for new veterans in terms of mental health. With the eVest Act, veterans will be automatically enrolled in VA care during their transition out of the military, with the choice to opt out of VA care rather than having to opt in later and attempt to navigate a new bureaucracy on their own. A smooth care transition from DoD to VA can help support veterans adjust to the next phase of their lives and provide easy access to healthcare should challenges arise. We know that veterans are much more likely to use VA services and care when the process is easy. And we know that VA care is world-class. Automatic enrollment is something policymakers and veteran service organizations have been trying to advance for years. And with eVest, it will finally become a reality. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back. Does any other member wish to be recognized to discuss H.R. 4673? Ranking Member Bost.
Yep, Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment to H.R. 4673.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 4670.
The rules, and without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with. Ranking Member Bost, you are recognized for 5 minutes in support of your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the intent of the underlying bill, which is support transition service members by helping them connect with seamlessly with the VA care. However, there are simply too many unknowns to proceed with it as written. Like many of our other bills on this agenda, this bill has not gone through regular order in this Congress. We had no indication that the bill had been introduced, that this Congress, or was a candidate for today's markup until Sunday evening. We have no views or cost estimates from VA. We have no current views from BSOs. We have an informal cost estimate from CBO. However, it is highly concerning. CBO estimates that this bill will have significant discretionary costs due to the influx of new veteran enrollees. We do not know how significant those costs could be or how many new enrollees CBO expects or what impact those new enrollees would have on access to care, staffing, or infrastructure. In fact, just last week, we had to pull a bill from the suspension calendar when a bill with a quote significant ended quote score came back at over $100 million. I recognize that the current priority group system that governs eligibility for care in the VA healthcare system is out of date and is in need of reform. That is why my amendment would strike the underlying bill and replace it with the text of my bill, H.R. 1216, the the modernizing of the Veterans Health Care Eligibility Act. The modernizing of the Veterans Health Care Eligibility Act would create a bipartisan commission to evaluate eligibility for care and recommend how to bring it into the 21st century. The commission would be fully bipartisan, made up of experts in the delivery of care and, of course, veterans themselves. It would put us on the path to improve eligibility for transitioning service members, but also for other groups of veterans who are arguably not well served today. Those others could include toxic exposed veterans, or minority veterans, or combat veterans, or veterans with other than honorable discharges, or veterans with mental health conditions. I think you get the picture. But my amendment would do more than just take a bigger picture than the underlying bill would. It would also give us the information, data, and time that we need to consider expanding the care responsibilities, to understand the cost of implementation of enrolling more veterans in the VA health system care system, to gather views and cost estimates from the VA and from diverse groups of additional stakeholders. This is certainly not too much to ask. I urge every member and every committee member to support my amendment. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Bost. But I appreciate your comments, but I must urge my colleagues to vote no on the Bost amendment to HR 4673. I want to remind members that we dedicated an entire hearing in this committee last Congress to Dr. Rowe's proposed eligibility commission, and it was widely opposed by veteran service organizations. And that's what this bill basically encompasses. Furthermore, it is a separate issue from this bill. To be clear, HR 4673 does not open up any new eligibilities for veterans. Let me repeat that. HR 4673 does not open up any new eligibilities for veterans. This bill simply ensures that all transitioning personnel, military personnel, learn whether they are eligible for VA care and services, and if so, their information is pre-populated into a VA database for easy access post-transition. Anyone who uses the VA as a result of this bill would already have been eligible for that care. So this is not really, we shouldn't conflate the idea of a commission which would study eligibility with basically what we already know, is that these veterans that are affected by HR 4673 are already eligible. We've heard from veterans that transitioning is challenging, and there is a lot of information, and many service members are eager to figure out how to re-enter civilian life. But we can really alleviate some of the stress associated with this by shifting some of the burden. And for these reasons, I urge my colleagues to vote no on the Bost amendment. Is there further debate on the Bost amendment in the nature of a substitute? And seeing none, I'll move to a vote. All those in favor of the Bost amendment say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed say no.
No.
No. No. No.
In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment in nature of a substitute is not agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. I now recognize, wait a minute, are we voting on the, I now recognize Chairman Levin for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that HR 4673 be reported favorably to the House.
Mr. Chairman, we never voted on the actual bill.
That's what I thought. I will now call for a vote on HR 4673, which was never amended, but we'll vote on it. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those
Aye.
opposed? All those opposed say no.
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 In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, can I request a roll call vote, please?
I second.
There being a sufficient second,
You're muted.
Mr. Chairman, you're muted.
there is a sufficient second pursuant to Rule 4 proceedings on this, on HR 4673 are postponed. All right, going on. Let's see. HR, here we go. Committee will now proceed to HR for consideration of HR 4626. The clerk shall designate the bill.
HR 4626. To
Without
amend.
objection, first reading is dispensed with. I recognize Ranking Member Boss to offer an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment in nature of a substitute.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 4626.
In advance pursuant to committee rules. Without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with and the substitute will be considered as original text for the purposes of amendment. Ranking Member Boss, you are recognized for 5 minutes in support of your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. HR 4626 and the VA assessment by independent measures or the AIM Act would require an independent assessment of the VA healthcare system every decade starting in 2025. The original independent assessment was required by the Choice Act of 2014 and published in 2015. It contains a gold mine of important insights and information that pay dividends for veterans nationwide, even now. My amendment in the nature of a substitute reflects the negotiations and language that the chairman and I agreed on last week. My amendment would streamline the content of the independent assessment. It would require that existing data sources be used to perform the independent assessment of the extended to the extent possible. And it would require VA to report to Congress following each independent assessment on the feasibility and advisability of the implementing and recommended improvements that the independent assessment contained. I was proud to work with General Berkman last week, and I'm proud to offer this amendment today to make the bill even stronger. As the saying goes, the only consistent thing in life is change. And the AIM Act, as amended, will help guarantee the VA keeps up pace with ongoing changes in the veterans community and the healthcare industry. It will provide a top to bottom evaluation of how well VA is caring for veterans and performing its critical research, education, and emergency response mission for the generations to come. I hope every member of this committee will join in supporting this legislation today. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Boss. Your amendment in nature of substitute improves upon General Bergman's original bill. And I appreciate that your committee staff considered input from my staff as they helped develop your amendment. Among other things, the amendment nature of substitute adds a requirement for VA to report to the committee on the feasibility and advisability of implementing any recommendations that may result from future independent assessments. I think this is an important change, and I encourage my colleagues to join me in voting in favor of this measure. Is there further discussion on the Boss amendment in nature of substitute?
Mr. Chairman, I seek recognition.
General Bergman, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm in full support of Ranking Member Boss' amendment in the nature of a substitute to my bill, HR 4626, the VA AIM Act. I thank him and Chairman Takano for agreeing to it and for their support of this very important bill. My bill would require an independent assessment of the VA healthcare system once every decade, starting in 2025. It is modeled off the independent assessment that was required in the Choice Act, published in 2015. As the saying goes, sunlight is the best disinfectant. This bill would throw the shades open across the VA healthcare system and let the sunlight pour in. It would ensure that veterans, VA staff, and lawmakers like us get a wealth of information every decade about how well the VA is caring for veterans and what changes should occur to ensure that VA can continue to provide timely, high-quality care to the men and women who serve. It would help equip Congress to better conduct our critical oversight and legislative functions. It would help veterans hold VA accountable for providing the best care and services possible. It would help VA leaders assess their challenges and opportunities and course correct as the delivery of care and the veteran population change. This bill was fully vetted during a legislative hearing earlier this month. I hope that we'll have the support of every member of the committee today. And with that, I yield back.
Well, thank you, General Bergman. Does any other member wish to be recognized to discuss the amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 4626? Seeing nobody seeking recognition, the question is now on the Boston amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 4626. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the Boston amendment in the nature of a substitute is agreed to. And without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. I now recognize Ranking Member Boss for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we report HR 4226 as amended favorably to the House floor.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Without objection, the staff is authorized to make necessary technical and conforming changes. General Bergman, you got your wish. You got through unanimously.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I, pursuant to House Rule 11, Clause 2, I give notice of intent to file minority and supplemental, additional, and dissenting views on HR 4626 as amended.
Without objection. I now call up HR 4625.
HR 4625 to amend title.
Advance pursuant to committee rules. Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is considered read and open for amendment at any point. I now recognize General Bergman for 5 minutes in support of his bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad to see my bill, the VA Caregiver Transparency Act, included in today's markup. This bill is a perfect example of how our committee should function and why regular order is critical to our work for veterans. The Subcommittee on Health held a roundtable discussion with VA, VSOs, and others last spring on VA's Family Caregiver Program. During that discussion, several serious concerns were raised. I drafted this bill to address those concerns. We held a legislative hearing on the bill 2 weeks ago. I made changes to the text of the bill in response to the feedback that was received from colleagues and stakeholders at that hearing. Because of that engagement and conversation, I am confident that the bill we are voting on today does what I intended to do and will improve the support that veterans and caregivers receive from VA. That is exactly how the legislative process should work. The VA Caregiver Transparency Act would allow VA to accelerate the expansion of Family Caregiver Program to veterans of all eras. It would clarify congressional intent regarding the clinical nature of the Family Caregiver Program and the applicability of the clinical appeals process. It would also improve oversight of the Family Caregiver Program by requiring VA to provide regular updates to this committee and our Senate counterparts, and by requiring VA, after consulting with VSOs, to report to Congress with recommendations for how the clinical appeals process could be strengthened. I want to thank VA, the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, WWP, the Wounded Warrior Program, DAV, and VFW in particular for their work with me on this bill. I hope that every member of this committee will join me in voting to report it to the full House today, and I yield back.
Thank you, General Bergman. And I want to say that I support this bill, as it will help make clear that it is Congress's intent that the program of comprehensive assistance for family caregivers be administered as a clinical program, not as a benefit. It also gives the Secretary the authority to speed up the expansion of eligibility for the program to the final cohort of veterans, if VA is prepared to do so. I do plan to vote in favor of the bill, and I encourage all of my colleagues to do the same. Is there further discussion on HR 4625?
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I introduced the VA Caregiver Transparency Act last week with General Bergman. This bill reflects the feedback we received from the VA and stakeholders during the subcommittee on health July 14th legislative hearing. It would allow VA to accelerate the full expansion of the Family Caregivers Program. It would clarify long-established congressional intent by stipulating that appeals for the Family Caregivers Program go through the VA's clinical appeals process, not through the Board of Veterans Appeals. And it would shine much needed sunlight on this important program by requiring regular reports on how the program is doing. It would also require a one-time report on how to improve the clinical appeals process so that it would work better for veterans and caregivers alike. Reporting this bill out of committee today is the right thing to do for veterans who serve and sacrifice for us and the caregivers who serve and sacrifice for them. I hope that it will have the support of every committee member. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Bost. Is there further debate on HR 4625? If not, I recognize Ranking Member Bost for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the report 4625 be favorably reported to the House.
Ranking Member Bost moves that HR 4625 be reported favorably to the House. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it and the motion is agreed to. Without objection, the staff is authorized to make necessary technical and conforming changes to the committee amendments.
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to House Rule 11, Clause 2, I give notice of intent to file minority and supplemental additional and dissenting views on HR 4625.
Without objection, the committee will now proceed to the consideration of HR 4233. The clerk will please designate the bill.
HR 4233, to amend Title 38 United States Code to furnish vet center readjustment counseling and related mental health services to veterans and members of the armed forces using certain educational assistance benefits.
The text was circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules. Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with. The bill is considered read and open for amendment at any time. Dr. Murphy, you're recognized for 5 minutes in support of your bill.
Mr. Chairman, Dr. Murphy I request leave to present the bill for Dr. Murphy.
Well, in that case, I recognize Ranking Member Bost to speak in favor of Mr. Murphy's bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm in full support of Dr. Murphy's bill, which I was proud to introduce with him 1 month ago. Student veterans face unique stressors due to their military service. Dr. Murphy's bill would provide them with an additional avenue of support. I want to thank the Student Veterans of America for their work to bring this bill to life. I am excited to see its reporting out of committee with bipartisan support this afternoon. With that, I yield back.
Well, thank you, Ranking Member Bost. I want to urge all my colleagues on the committee to support HR 4233, the Student Veterans Counseling Centers Eligibility Act. We know that student veterans face challenges. They can face challenges as they begin the new phase of their lives following military service, where they become students. We want them to be able to seek and find support at vet centers. We also encourage VA to continue monitoring the need for increased funding, staffing, and resources for vet centers as a result of demand for these services delivered by other veterans. Does any other member wish to be recognized to discuss HR 4233? Seeing none. Then I recognize Ranking Member Boss for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we report HR 4233 favorable to the House floor.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. Without objection, the staff is authorized to make necessary technical and conforming changes to the committee amendments.
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to House Rule 11, Clause 2, I give notice of intent to file minority and supplemental additional and dissenting views on HR 4233.
Without objection, so ordered. Ranking Member Boss, I need a clarification on our proceedings. Was the request for a roll call vote made to the motion to report HR 4673?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. I threw the proceedings off. I should have allowed the motion to report the bill favorably since HR 4626 was not amended. There was no need for that vote, and my request for a roll call vote would have been on the motion to report to the floor.
So the chair accepts your clarification. The roll call vote that we are going to take is on the motion to report HR 4673 to the floor since it was not amended. The clerk will call the roll, and the question before us is whether to report HR 4673 to the floor. A yes vote means that we are reporting the bill to the floor, and no vote means we are not. So the clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Brownlee.
Aye.
Mr. Lamb.
Aye.
Mr. Levin.
Aye.
Mr. Pappas.
Aye.
Ms. Loria. Ms. Loria. Mr. Mervan.
Aye.
Mr. Sablan.
Aye.
Ms. Underwood.
Aye.
Mr. Allred. Ms. Frankel.
Aye.
Mr. Brown.
Aye.
Ms. Slotkin.
Aye.
Mr. Trone.
Aye.
Ms. Capter. Ms. Capter. Dr. Ruiz. Dr. Ruiz.
Aye.
Mr.
Ms.
Gallego.
Luria votes aye.
Ms. Loria votes aye.
Thank you.
Ruiz votes aye.
Dr. Ruiz votes aye. Mr. Gallego. Mr. Gallego. Mr. Bost. Mr. Bost.
No.
Ms. Radewagen. Ms. Radewagen. Mr. Bergman.
No.
Mr. Banks.
No.
Mr. Roy. Mr. Roy. Dr. Murphy.
No.
Mr. Mann.
Mann votes no.
Mr. Moore.
No.
Ms. Mace. Ms. Mace. Mr. Cawthorn. Mr. Cawthorn.
Cawthorn votes no.
Mr. Nels.
No.
Mr. Rosendale.
No.
Dr. Miller Meeks.
No.
Ms. Capter. Ms. Radewagen. Mr. Roy. Chairman Takano.
Chairman Takano votes aye.
Clerk, how's Representative Gallego noted?
How is Mr. Gallego recorded?
I do not have a vote recorded for Mr. Gallego.
Mr. Gallego?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I vote aye.
Mr. Greiger votes aye. Clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, for this vote, there are 16 ayes and 10 noes.
The motion to report is agreed to. The clerk, the staff will have, without objection, the staff will make necessary and conforming changes. Without objection, the motion is laid, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Ranking Member Bost.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I'm proud of the bills we passed here with bipartisan support today, and but I think that we can do a lot better at this. I want to work with you well in advance of markups moving forward to develop bipartisan agendas of bills that are fully vetted, fully paid for, and that we can both fully support. In the meantime, I stand by to continue to work with you on these bills and the rest of the committee to the extent that we are not surprised by a late-breaking CBO score that comes at a much higher than anticipated that has happened before. And I am committed to providing appropriate offsets before bills are considered on the floor. And on one final note, I want to say a word about the surge in COVID-19 cases that we're seeing across this country and in many VA medical facilities. If you are a veteran who has not been vaccinated and you have questions about the vaccine, please reach out to your doctor that you trust and do what you need to keep yourself and your family safe. VA announced earlier this week that the department would require Title 38 employees in VA medical facilities to get the vaccine. I appreciate Secretary McDonough and his leadership team, including Dr. Lieberman, were proactive about communicating with me and my staff this week about that mandate. I have been assured that this includes exemptions for employees who have health or religious concerns about the vaccine. I hope that will keep veterans and employees safe. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for today, and I want to thank the committee members and staff for their work, and with that, I yield back.
Ranking Member Bost, I really want to express my gratitude for the statement you just made. I care, as you do, about all the veterans who may not have received their vaccinations, and your resounding urging of our veterans to get vaccinated, with the knowledge that the mandate being issued by our secretary, the VA, for our employees also has the requisite exemptions. Both VA employees and our veterans, this is a very, very important thing that you have just said, and in a bipartisan manner, I think we both agree that we must do everything possible to avert any prolonging of the current surge that we're seeing. And so I'm greatly heartened by your statement. I appreciate the general comity that exists between you and me, and the general sense that I have that together we are aligned behind beating back this virus and getting our nation back in good stead and protecting and serving our veterans. So thank you very much, Ranking Member. That concludes the business of this markup. And with that, I want to ask if any other member wishes to be recognized before we adjourn. If I don't see anybody wanting to be recognized, I will say that the meeting is now adjourned.